Alright, Noah, so I'm going to go through your email. I tried making videos like 4 times this past week. Every time I was very unhappy with how incoherently I speak, so hopefully this one won't turn out so badly. Okay, so number 1, you're asking about triple stops that are not short and crisp like the ones you described, but like the ones in the variations on an original. So I'll give you a generic description of what I like to break down into about 4 different chords. 4 different ways of playing, 4 or 3, something like that. Triple stops and 4-note chords, right? They're kind of similar, not completely. On the one end of the spectrum, you have like the Baroque style, right? You could play like one note, one string at a time. Right, something like that. And that should be fairly easy for you. You just literally evenly roll across 3 or 4 strings, okay? Now the other type I described is the other end of the spectrum, where you're doing triple stops, and instead of playing each note by itself, you're literally playing all 3, you can't do 4 for this, notes at the same time. In order to do this, right, you need to go a little closer to the fingerboard where the strings are softer, which means you can, with a little bit of pressure, or whatever you want to call it, you can flatten the curvature of the strings a little bit, right? Easier than here. So it's easier to grab all 3 strings nearer to the fingerboard, and you would probably keep the hand a little in, right? Not out, because then for some reason the traction of the bow is a little harsher, but also it doesn't grab as consistently. So bring it a little in, preferably flat hair, so that you can use all the hairs to grab all 3 strings and near the fingerboard. Make sure you are putting your bow on the middle string, so if it's D, A, and E, you would put the bow on the A string, give it a little push downwards, and then you can see that you're basically touching all 3 strings. And then, once you've grabbed all 3 strings, you would do a little circular motion, either with your smaller muscles or with your forearm. Doesn't really matter, it depends how fast you're trying to go, right? And then you would just come right back and reset. Okay? That's the other extreme. Now, in between those so I guess you could, there are 2 more. So there's one that's a complete break, right? So you play more than 1 string at a time, unlike the Baroque, right? You play, let's say, you're actually playing 2 notes at the same time. However, you are not rolling as much. It's a clean break. Now, brief description of this type of a chord is just you might want to keep the bow a little inwards, okay, for better traction. And then, good grip, and then just pull the bow across 2 strings. Oh my god, sorry. It's close enough. Okay, so 2 strings, pull the bow, 2 at a time, and you simply roll across the middle string when it's time. Roll. Okay, and at the end of the chord, as with all chords, you should have a little bit of upward motion. So I know your chord is going down like this, right? You're going down. However, as you pull the bow, follow the curvature of the bow, give it a little bit of an upward lift to get that good release of the sound, right? And then finally, there is the kind of chord where it's you're playing, you're kind of rolling, but you're still doing 2 or more strings at the same time. So you're rolling, but you're playing. You're not doing a Baroque roll, 1 string at a time. You're doing more than 1 string at a time. So those are the 4 types. If you could clarify specifically what is concerning about the longer triple stops, basically, from a technical standpoint, you need to master the short, crisp ones, mainly because that teaches your hand the basics of grabbing and starting a stroke and releasing the chord. That's the hardest part of the entire chord technique problem. Okay, so it's grabbing the strings cleanly and not crushing it, instead releasing, being able to release the sound in a wavy motion. So once you master the where it's not right, or you're not, don't have to roll it, or you can play it together, right? Once you master that, you've mastered one of the most difficult parts of playing any chord, which is grabbing this more than one string cleanly and then releasing it, the sound. That's why I think it's very important that you work on that first. Now, if you apply that to a longer chord, you're simply taking the same idea, same physical movement as well, grabbing the chord, and then just adding a long lyrical stroke to it. If you're having trouble with specific melodies or sections, that becomes a specific issue after you've mastered all 4 types of chords. Because, like for example, depending on what you're playing, the chords, they have a melodic line. The other notes of the chord are harmony, correct? So if that's the case, then what happens is you obviously need to highlight the melody, and that becomes a case-by-case issue of applying the chord technique. For example, like some people play the first variation of the chaconne, like the sorry, I got a complete new setup. I can't play anything in tune, besides the fact that I can't, anyways. So the melody is on the D string, right? That's the melody. So if you normally play the chord, you could play right from lower to upper string, right? But since the melody is on the lower string, some people like to return to the first. So you play the chord. So you, and then same thing here. So the G's. So right. And same thing here. So how you use these chords, like, or use, for example, if you do the Paganini. But the melody is on the top, right? So if you play those notes, like if you accent, if you need to accent any part of that chord, it should be the top, right? So that would change how you apply the normal triple stop. In the beginning, you know, obviously the technique you're applying is a short, crisp triple stop, right? It's a grab and release, right? However, because you want to accent the top note, the technique changes slightly, right? And then as you go on, but that part again, I think that's right. Again, you're trying to accent the top, right? So it's still grab and release, and then it's a rolling chord for some of the bigger ones. However, how you apply it changes a little bit, because you're trying to nuance the melody of the top line. So if that's what you're wondering about, please give me a specific example. Otherwise, if you have a question about literally how to move the bow for any of those 4 types of chords, please ask me that as well. I'll do my best. The 4th finger vibrato, I would actually need to see a short video. The core idea, though, is that I think your pinky is getting definitely strong enough, but the question usually is how much of a 4th finger vibrato have you consistently done for at least a year or more? Right, so that's the biggest issue, because something like a pinky vibrato is literally a difficult new skill that is often overlooked, because in repertoire, often things are fingered on purpose so that you don't have to vibrate the 4th finger, right? And that's done purposely, which means in repertoire, you're often not required to use it. And then in technique, it's something that most people do not practice over, let's say, 2 years consistently. And as you might imagine, with any difficult technique, I mean, like, you can get it, after, like a week or two or maybe a month. But for it to really settle down, it takes time. So knowing how much you've done and how long you practice that consistently would definitely help me answer the question. With your arm tightening up, I think that what you can try is putting down the third finger, right, with the fourth finger, so together like this, and then just try wobbling. Don't even think about doing a fast vibrato. Bring your elbow forward. See how wobbly that is? I would practice just having a wobbly, slow vibrato first, and finding the right angle at which you feel the most comfortable with your elbow and with putting down your two fingers, right? So if you find an extreme angle more comfortable, I would find that first, just vibrating at a wobble. I'm pretty sure that when your wobble is slow enough, you won't tense up. So if you're still tensing up, you could go like super slow, right? Or even slower, right? That feels really weird. But in any case, really slow and see if it works. If it still doesn't work, I have one more question. I'm wondering if you have done the vibrato exercise on the pinky, with the elbow forward and with the two fingers down together, if you've done that exercise consistently. I've noticed that most violinists who have a really good pinky vibrato have actually paid their dues. Now, I don't have a great pinky vibrato because I am definitely on the lazy side, but all my friends who have a great pinky vibrato, it's very rare that I see somebody who has that naturally. I've noticed that people have spent extra time on making sure their vibrato sounds even across all fingers, and so it's important for me to know if you've spent, once again, significant amount of time and a consistent amount of time, and also consistent practice with, like, let's say the basic vibrato exercise you were doing, this one. If you were giving extra time for the pinky over a long period of time yet. So please let me know and give me more details on how you've been practicing it, and I'll let you know the tricks, the tricks based on what you let me know. Okay, the role of the fingers in the core grip. The middle end finger, ring finger, I prefer to pull with both fingers. Now it's a slightly different way of approaching the bow hole. If you, just as the great and honorable Kurt said, if you use the thumb and the middle finger as a core grip, what happens is the ring finger can, and that's not always the case, it could be a difference of wording, but if this is a core grip, and this comes down and this comes down and this is the balance finger, this guy, if it's not secure, right, together in terms of securing the bow hold and pulling on the bow together, this becomes the core, right, obviously, and it becomes that much more loose of a grip, okay? And here's the thing, the grip itself being loose is not a good thing, okay? We want the contact between the finger and the bow as secure as possible, almost as if you're like this crazy cyborg, that has been basically attached to the bow. Like, kind of another way of saying, like, the bow is an extension of your arm. Like, if you think about it, if you're a machine, then you're literally clicking right there, right? And it's clicking right there. And that way the grip, the contact points between the finger and the bow are secure, right? This does not mean that all the joints you know, if you look at cyborgs with those crazy joints and all, it doesn't mean that the hand itself and the small muscles are not flexible, okay? It means that the contact point grips are solid, and the small muscles and all the fingers and all are completely flexible and strong and independent, okay? So I prefer to have both fingers work together more, because if you do that, then the tone control becomes a little more, how should I say it? You can put more weight through both fingers, right? Like this. If you try it like this, as opposed to this becomes quite strained. Again, if it's one finger, remember how if you only use the index finger to push, the poor little finger, it might be strong, but can kind of get strained from pushing. Same thing with this. If you only pull with one finger, right, it's just half the pulling strength. So I prefer to do this, and if you do this, then structurally you are already able to have a larger range of weight application into the bow. You can experiment with this. An easy way to feel those fingers is you can just take a ledge or your finger and just hang with one finger, hang with two fingers. And if you hang with two fingers, obviously you'll feel more this side of your arm engage. This is kind of a different feeling, right? And then if you try just pushing with your index finger, that's a completely different feeling too. So my answer is that I prefer to have both fingers down together, and pulling and directing the bow as the core, like the captain core of the grip, as much as possible. Kurt's thing is not a big problem. If you play like him, what will happen is that the fast strokes, where your little fingers have to engage, right? Those strokes will obviously become more loose. So there's a greater chance that instead of your little fingers actually moving like this, what will happen is they might just be slipping a little more. And some people play fine like that, you know, through practice. I just prefer the stability of having all the grip on as much as possible and letting the small muscles develop so that it's flexible and strong, and not using like any slipping to help with fast motions. Yeah, so that's that. Now with the bow mechanics, you said that the upper arm leads, and I remember saying something, the strokes on the upper arm, the energy that moves the bow goes through the arm, wrist, and the bow. Okay. So it seems like you say the energy is trapped in the forearm when you're at the tip. Okay. So if you're saying that you feel like there's isolation of energy and movement in specific bow strokes, that in itself is a good thing. For example, tremolo, you got to realize that depending on the the stroke, you should clearly do the motion from a different part of your arm. Now with the long general mechanics, I think you're spot on. Some people describe it a little differently, but that's what you described is what I prefer. Very traditional, and upper arm leading, just like a pitcher, right? You throw it, and if you look at the arm, actually the upper arm leads, and then the hand follows, right? It's not like you don't throw like this with your hand always in front. So same idea with the bow, upper arm beginning of all motions. However, with some of these smaller, I think I sent you a video of my bow staccato. I'll attach it here. Certain strokes need to simply be from different parts of the arm. When you do tremolo, right? When you do tremolo at the tip, right? That's not very good, but you see that with the speed, it's actually important that your energy is trapped in your smaller muscles, your forearm and your hand. Okay, it should not originate from the upper arm. Okay, that's very good actually. That means that you are doing a specific skill instead of just imitating now. Okay, if you're an imitator, you would do everything with the same part of the arm and you just try to make the sound. But if you're a skillful technician, you know that tremolo is better done through the forearm and the small muscles, and that's what you will use. And if that's what you mean by trapping the energy there, that's actually spot on. Wrist and fingers for very fast spiccato. I'm assuming you mean satie, if you could clarify that. Because spiccato, you don't need to trap it as much. You can use bigger muscles, right? But the satie, you need to trap it, if that's what you mean, in the wrist and fingers for very fast speeds. So if that's what's happening to you, and that feels weird, I think you should realize that you are actually spot on. And what counts now is that if you haven't done that for like 4 years consistently, it's going to feel weird because it's new even though it's right. And you just need to tell yourself that this is the stroke, and that and you need to train it consistently over a long period of time until it's like an on and off button. You're like a machine, like spiccato, boom, and then you use a certain part of the bow. And then you use, boom, tremolo, you push the tremolo button, and then all of a sudden you're just isolating the small muscles of the forearm at the tip, and you just have to turn it on. You don't have to worry about using your upper arm and all that anymore. Okay, so that should answer most of your questions. I look forward to hearing your clarifications on all these issues. Okay, bye.